Hi, welcome back to VeloNews TV. I'm Neil Rogers. I'm here with Chris Horner for another installment of the Horner Diaries, Stage 10. It's going to be a hot one today, but first I want to talk about yesterday. Another good day for you in the mountains. You're riding great.
Yeah, the form's good, and I think a good day for everyone watching TV, watching the Tour de France. That was spectacular racing, and definitely edge of the couch watching there and viewing it. Fans must have been loving it all day yesterday.
Interesting day. It was similar in some ways to Sunday, where there was a lot of action on the climbs, but with the exception of Vino losing time and I guess Pereiro.
Well, you had a lot of guys losing time too, because you had Frank Schleck with me, you had Pereiro with me, you had Vino with me, Cash is King. So a lot of guys losing time that was in the group that I was in.
Yeah. Were you surprised at all to see Cash King come back for Vinokurov?
I don't know if he came back or got dropped. I would say he got dropped first, and then he came back, because what happened is there was the front, the sole leader, of course. There was the next group of the two Discovery riders. There's Cadel by himself. After Cadel, there was the group chasing, the main group with the race leader. Then Cassius King had gotten dropped from that, and then there was myself and one of the Escatel-Escady riders along with some CSC riders. And so to me it looked like he had gotten dropped out of Cadel Evans' group, the leaders group, and then came back. And then he had to wait over the top from my group to go back and get Vino and then bring him back up to my group. And then they were all working at the front, driving as hard as they could into the finish, trying to get as much help as possible. But no one's going to give those guys any help when they all had a leader up the road.
Sure. What was it like for you? I saw you were riding very close to Vinokurov quite a bit on that climb. Yeah. From your perspective, to see him knowing that the Tour was slipping away up the road?
Well, it's mixed emotions for me. My job is to look after Cadel, which is exactly what I was doing in the back. At one point in time, Christian Vandervelde was riding fantastic, and Frank Schleck had dropped out of that front group. Christian had gotten on the front and almost pulled us back up to the front group, but then Frank had started to lose Christian's wheel again, and there was a point where we could have went across, I'm certain, Christian and I together, but maybe we would have pulled Frank Schleck with us, maybe we would have pulled Vino with us, and so it was a point to where I just had to sit back and go, okay, my job is to look after Cadel, and sometimes you can do that job from the back too. You don't always have to be the rider to do it. So I sit back, I wait, I stay calm, and it's exciting to see how the race unfolds for me too, because I know, you know, with Cadel up front and with Vino on my wheel, that now Cadel's putting a lot of time in a lot of the favorites.
You say mixed emotions because maybe there's also just a hair of sympathy.
You always, well, a hair of sympathy too. You see Vino, I mean, he had a hard crash, he's had some hard days, and you see him out there struggling to be there. Personal ambitions too, you want to be at the front, you want a shot at going for the stage win too, but you got a guy like Cadel Evans that's just riding fantastic and can win the Tour de France, and so you got to always do your job first, and that's part of it. But absolutely, that was a spectacular day of emotions, of highs all over, from every kind of direction imaginable you were getting them.
You know, in the past, Cadel has at times maybe been criticized a little bit for following wheels and not being real aggressive in the Tour de France. We saw him yesterday, the only guy to go with Contador. We also saw him attack up in the hill into Briançon. Yeah. Did you have a chance to talk to him after the stage about animating the race a bit?
Well, yeah, he was definitely animating the race. I think that what would really start happening is as we were coming up to the final 7, 8K, whatever might have been of the Galibier there, I think it was Valverde that put in the first hit, and then Cadel put in the second hit, and then after that it had split up, and then Contador had put in another attack then, and then you saw Cadel jump, bridge across to him, did a little bit of work with him, and then you saw Contador drop Cadel. Of course, Contador had a teammate up the road. Maybe, maybe not, it was a good idea to drop Cadel. Now that you see in hindsight, you go, well, maybe it wasn't a good idea to get rid of Cadel, because if they would have kept him, maybe the three could have worked together and actually held off everybody all the way to the line. But instead, they chose to leave Cadel behind. Cadel went over the top by himself, who of course got caught from the group behind, and then of course they caught the front guys right before the finish.
How much of that, I mean, obviously it was a long descent, but how much of that was a matter of the wind, the headwind?
Well, you're going to come back on that descent. I think we had discussions about it in our team, and we said absolutely you have to have at least 3 minimum. 4 is probably what it would take to go to all the way to the finish on that descent without a significant time gap. I mean, you look at the winner, he went over there over the top with maybe 3-minute lead or something. He finished the race with a 30-second win, more or less. So you see how much time he lost. You saw the two Discovery guys, Contador, and he went over the top with a good minute. They both got brought back. You saw Cadel go over by himself. He got brought back. No one can hold off a group on a descent like that. It's too big and too much of a headwind.
Sure. Well, with the Alps behind us, feeling's got to be pretty good in the Predictor Lotto camp. Obviously, these few flat stages in the next few days coming into the time trialer stages that ideally you guys would have had Robbie in there for the stage win. With Robbie gone, the team can rally around Cadel. Your form is good. Yeah. Cadel is riding very well. With no real time trial specialist in this race, Cadel's got to have as good a chance as anybody for the podium and maybe for the overall.
Well, maybe only one mistake in that whole thing right there is I think Clodin is a time trial specialist. And amazingly enough, with Astana doing just about everything they can to wreck Clodin's chances of winning the Tour de France, he's still up there with a shot at winning it. So he's got to be looked as still as one of the favorites. He didn't lose much time, as amazingly enough, as much as they haven't used him to actually try to win the Tour, as much as they used him to try to help Vino win the Tour, he's still in the best position right now, I think, to take the Tour. He's 1 minute behind guys and there's 2 long time trials coming up. He's capable of what we've seen in the past anyways, going off of past records, he's capable of making up that kind of time. Cadel's very capable of holding a minute. So we're right at that range where the two are going to be real close. I think right now you look on paper, Cadel's the better of the time trials outside of the Claude.
Outside of Claude. And you talked about Astana trying to wreck Claude's chances, but did you see a shift yesterday when Vino couldn't hold the wheel and Claude? I mean, was that the turning point where, okay, Claude, now you race for yourself. Alexander can't hold it.
I don't know where the shift came from. At some point during the race, Vino was just too far back to actually go with the tax, because he was behind me when the tax started, and he actually had to come up to my wheel. But Clodin was probably already near the front. Gets really kind of confusing when there's that many riders going on, to be real clear, but I'm pretty certain Clodin was already up there along with Cassius King, and then Cassius King had fallen out or either dropped back. To me, it looked like he'd gotten dropped, but you'd have to ask him for the true facts. With that being said, though, I guess at that point in time, they must have decided that, okay, Clodin, do your race.
Right. Well, hey, Chris, we've been getting a ton of reader email. People are really enjoying the diaries, and want to thank you again for all the time. If you have any more questions for Chris, send them in to VeloNewsTV@InsideInc.com. Today we got an interesting question, and it comes from Anthony. Didn't get a last name, but that's okay. I've heard the name Patron mentioned a few times now while watching Horner's daily interviews. I consider myself pretty savvy to the cycling world, but it's the first time I've ever heard of this guy. So a little unclear on the terminology, but what exactly was his role in the field, and what was it like during the race getting orders or info from him? Just wanted to add, Chris has quickly become one of my favorite riders through these interviews. He comes across as so legit, no ego. Good luck with the rest of the tour.
Well, thanks for the comments. Thanks for sending the emails. Well, the Patron's just the head boss of the whole peloton in general. He's just the guy that he has control over, not everything, of course, no one has control over everything, but he has a lot of control on how the pace may or may not be set for that particular day. You see it with Bernard, you saw it with Indurain, you've seen it with Lance Armstrong. Those type of guys had control over the field. Those were guys that you just did not want to upset their mentality of racing. Otherwise, if you were to go up the road on a flat stage or something, might be he just wants to put his team on the front and chase you down just because you upset him on one of the maybe you stopped to take a pee and you attacked at that particular point in time. That kind of stuff never happened to those guys. When they stopped to take a pee, the racing stopped.
Sure, the Patron generally is the head of the peloton, and he decides the pee breaks, he decides the breakaways. He sort of calls the shots. And that's not just here at the Tour de France. I mean, even when you were racing back in the U.S., you would have been considered one of the patrons of the national peloton.
Yeah, absolutely. You have a little bit of say on what's going to happen and stuff like that. And guys give you a little more respect, a little more space in the field. You're coming into the final climb. You want to sit the fifth wheel because it's the best spot to be. You slide into the fifth spot. You don't actually have to fight or bump anyone for that fifth spot. They just open up the spot. You slide in. Saves you a little bit of energy.
Well, Chris, it's going to be a long, hot one today. We appreciate your time. I know you got to get to the start, so we'll look for you tomorrow.
All right, good talking with you.